Welcome to the Women in Vinyl podcast with Jen DiEugenio, founder of Women in Vinyl, and contributor Robin Raymond. This podcast facilitates conversations with those working in the vinyl record industry to educate, demystify, and diversify the vinyl community.
Thanks for tuning in to episode 26 of the Women in Vinyl podcast. You just heard the song Change by Stas Thee Boss off their album On the Quarner. Thanks to Stas and Crane City Music for the use of the song. Crane City is a fantastic Seattle-based hip-hop label with the mission to promote local Black voices, in particular those of women and queer artists, committed to putting money and opportunity into the community. Today's guest is Bailey Moses, the magician behind the bespoke artistic cuts created under their business, Hocus Bogus. You may have seen their work for the Linda Lindas or the creative upcycled records made out of VHS tapes, flowers, food, and just about anything else you can imagine. Thank you for joining us. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
My name is Bailey, and I make a lot of bastardized record monstrosities, is what I like to call my creations. I feel like most people are probably familiar in some capacity with lathe cutting. So, at its base, I make records that are technically embossed out of polycarbonate plastic, which, I feel like over the past, when I got into it, it wasn't quite 10 years ago, but I've been doing it for a minute now. And I feel like it's really gained a lot of popularity, and a lot of people are more familiar with it. But so I personally, with Hocus Bogus records, kind of my MO is just to make the weirdest, kind of dumbest, gimmickiest things I possibly can. It's kind of my mantra. If my partner's not rolling their eyes at me for what I've shown them, it is not weird enough.
Yeah, like VHS tapes and flowers and food I've seen.
I started doing it, it's like I started getting into it, and the person who's kind of my lathe mentor, who I think
which is who?
Which is Mike Dixon. He's every time I mention it, it's like every time someone's like, if someone's like, oh, I have a lathe or I'm into lathes, I'm like, Mike, and it's like, it's 95% of people that I feel like most people, he's probably sold you your lathe if you have like a Presto.
Yeah, he owns the Presto name. Like, he's like the Presto guy.
Yeah, he's like, I have all this like Presto merch now.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Like every time I buy something, he sends me like a bunch of weird Presto stuff. But he just taught me, like, I met him, I was living in Tucson, and I met him at a party, and I knew he did this stuff, and I was like, can I like come like sweep up at your studio or something sometime? Like, I knew that like he would have people come in and like do things for him. And then I went in, and the next thing I knew, I had a job. Like, he's like showing me, he's like, this is how you do this, this, and this, or you got to cut these 20 records. But yeah, he's just like, he started the whole, I can't take credit for that. Like, he started really doing weird stuff, which I think really inspired me. And then it became like a friendly rivalry where like I would try to think of weird things, and like, he's a hard person to impress, but every now and then it's
I feel like he does that on purpose, because he's like, he's a little bit Gandalf-y, for all of us upstart weirdos. Like, he wants to be like just encouraging enough that you're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna try that thing, and then he's like, you could have done it this way or this way or like this way to make it better, and you're like, oh yeah, okay, I could have done it that way. Or that
oh my God, Robin, is this therapy? I'm like, too, yeah.
It might be for both of us.
I feel like that was he was a big, working with him was a big inspiration for me, because it kind of got my brain thinking more in that way, being around him, or just, kind of really trying to outdo.
Yeah.
And I mean, not outdo, but like come up with weird things too, and be like, oh yeah, well, what about this? And
Yeah.
I don't know. I've just, especially I feel like over the past couple years, have just really leaned into it and trying to think of goofy and strange things to do. It just brings me a lot of joy.
You both are doing such interesting, innovative things. But maybe Bailey, you could talk to some of the projects that you've done that incorporate some of these interesting, like weird, innovative ideas.
Yeah, what have been your like best materials and maybe your worst
Yeah.
materials?
We learned from Heath, like, fencing wasn't working very well for that. So
Yeah, snow fence is a bad move.
Yeah, I think
press
I've
records.
done less of I'm mostly sticking to like the plastics. But for me, it's more so like what weird kind of art project, or like I've been more into like 3D objects, I guess. And like, how can I make this record more of a weird thing? And kind of like you're saying, because I also work in vinyl pressing, like for my day job. I also make weird records for I Am 8-Bit, but most of that has to be, when you think of that, it has to be something that's more like mass produced, or like packaging is usually where you get weird, because at the end of the day, if you are a record company selling records, your records need to sound good and be functional. And so for me, where lathes have really just kind of let my creativity go wild, is that I'm like, I don't have to make these for a lot of people, so I can make one really dumb thing that makes me smile, and that's all I have to do. I don't always, and sometimes I do make a lot of them, but yeah, one that is stupid that I would never make for people because they're tricky to play even is turning like VHS tapes into records, and I'm putting like a coating on them. So it's like, it's still like a record surface on there, but I just thought it was so funny to drill like an entire hole through a VHS tape and you put it on. And so those were pretty wacky. Last Valentine's Day, I turned a box of chocolates that I bought for my partner into a little record, and then you could open it up and eat the chocolate.
That's awesome.
Did you see the record that was made out of chocolate?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's like a playable one that was made out of chocolate. And I was like, I don't know if that's a good.
Wasn't there that one out of ice that we
there was an ice one,
yeah,
too.
Yeah, that was
But yeah, I mean, there's I loved the candy box one. I think that one was like one of my favorites. I also love the ones where you do like pressed flowers and vegetation.
Those were
so pretty.
They're so pretty. It's become kind of the bane of my existence, because everybody wants them. And I'm like, the reason I was able to do that one was it was for my partner's sister, who also, makes beautiful music. But I wanted to do a record release for her. And so we pressed the flowers together, and it's like, it was a weeks long process just to get everything ready. And then assembling them was a huge pain, because getting them to stick together, because once flower leaves dry, they want to come apart, and it's just a lot.
It's a lot.
They look beautiful for things that I will never, most of these projects, I'm like, they're lovely, I will never do them again. Maybe someday once I forget, but
I mean, that's exactly what Heath says. Like, it's like, oh, yeah, like I used to run into the manager's office at Gallagher and be like, look at this fucking cool thing I made. And he was like, can you do it again? And Heath would be like, maybe.
It's not about that.
Yeah. No, it's just about the cool thing. Yeah. How often did people, because I know that Jen has actually recommended you based on the flower record.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
Look at what she did. This is so rad. So I'm sorry.
No.
As the Canadian delegate on this panel, I apologize.
No, you were so fine. And it's like, I'm always flattered. I think really what it comes down to is like, I've kind of made it like, Hocus Bogus used to be something that I did as like a full-time job. I was living in Arizona, which is much cheaper than Los Angeles.
What?
And it was fun, and I was really doing it full time, like doing stuff fully for other people and pretty much whatever they wanted, but it really limited kind of the creativity. It was, I was making really run of the mill. I could only offer like however many options. And so when I kind of took myself, like, I'm not doing it really like publicly, I'll still take on projects for people that reach out to me, but mostly it's like collaborations or artists that I reach out to. It like, that's kind of what opened up the opportunity to do this crazy stuff, because I was working more with like, all of a sudden I'm like, I'm not trying to make money off of this. This is purely more of like, I want to make something really beautiful with these people. And it's, I can take a lot more time to do it, versus it gets really tricky when you also tell people like, it's hard for me to always price out my labor for something like that.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, it's an insane amount of work, but I also feel, I have that guilt of being like, but I know that all artists don't necessarily have a lot of money for something like this. And
well, and so we talk a lot about minimums.
Yeah.
Because, there's always this confusion, I think, where people come to pressing plants and they want low runs. And if they can't get them with us, then they go to lathe cutters, and then they assume that you can do a 200 or 100 piece run. So
yeah.
What would your minimums be for something that, say, is a super like special project like that, versus something that maybe is a little bit more standard?
I'm probably different than most lathe cutters, because I know most people, or when I was doing more like square or round or like simpler cuts, I would probably say like 20 to 25 was my minimum. But now, honestly, I'm personally more likely to take a job if somebody is like, I want one really weird thing, because I'm like, I can do that in an afternoon. I can really enjoy doing it. I'm more of like a maximum person now, to where it's like, I, for the most part, won't accept anything or won't bother making something more than like 100. But like, I know that, I mean, even so, I think a lot of lathe cutters that, I was working with, they mostly sit like, I feel like 500 lathe cuts is a lot of lathe cuts, or even 200 lathe cuts. It's a lot of lathe cuts, because you're making all of these in real time, whether or not you're doing anything crazy to the disc. It's a lot of manpower to cut all those.
Robin's a masochist, so she did that.
How many lathes are you using, Robin?
This one.
That's me, because when I was out of the studio, we had 8 was the thing. It was like, we all kind of like had a timeshare lathe studio.
Whoa.
Yeah, and so that, it made a lot of sense there, because it was like everybody kind of owned one, or you kind of paid rent on other people's machines, and you could run all of them at the same time, which is a whole other kind of like
crazy
circus. So trying to like start
and were they all presto, so that's all like a mono situation the whole time?
We had one side, they're all mono, one side was all presto 6Ns, at least at the time, and then the other side was like a rotating Frankenstein lathe part sort of side of stuff that would be like, oh, this one got sold, and
whatever Mike decided to build. Bless him. I love it. 500 was a lot. It was the same record for 21 days straight.
And that's when I say, like, when it's like, that's why, for my own sanity, and because I'm mostly doing this in my free time, or like at nights, like my, a lot of my evenings have become like, I'm gonna grab a beer, watch some X-Files, and run some records. I think I enjoy it a lot more not having it as my full-time thing, because it was like, it is stressful, it's like, it's kind of, whenever the pressing plants are good, I would notice that like less orders would come in, and then as soon as they would fill up, or like around holiday times, which I think is also just probably normal for pressing plants as well, but like that ebb and flow of like, you're kind of like banking on vinyl pressing plants to suffer in order for lathe cuts to
Please enjoy this PVC shortage. That's sometimes I'm kind of like dancing on the graves of pressing plants, and at the same time I'm like, please don't ever ask me to do 100, please don't.
Was the grind of it sort of what made you decide to get a job with I Am 8-Bit?
No, I mean, when I moved out to LA, I think the big thing was just going down from having 8 machines to 1. I just kind of had to reassess, because I as you're doing the math, at least for me, and I was just kind of like, I think I also freaked myself out, and like, if this one machine goes down and then I fall behind on this, and like, I don't know, I think I was just personally also interested in, I think at that point, kind of exploring what else in music I wanted to do. And, I did some other things, and inevitably here I am working in vinyl again.
Yeah.
I kind of went through I was so hardcore into like lathes and records. And then I think I went kind of like for a brief, almost like a year or so point where I needed like a break from it altogether. Like, I don't think I bought any vinyl records. I wasn't cutting lathes. Like, I just needed a break to realize I was like, this is something I love so much. When it's like you eat, sleep, breathe, do it all the time, can be intense, as we all know.
Yeah, it is intense. I mean, and that's the thing. It's like, we're so involved in the process. It's hard to not get so attached to doing it. I mean, it's easy to take a break from music, like other people's music, because you're so invested in what you're doing that, I mean, your ears get fatigued, your body gets fatigued, and you're just like, I'm just going to put on a sassy television show and call it a day. And that's
yeah. And I also think that's what I noticed it myself for a second there, was like, and why I think I also needed to reassess is I think there was a moment where I wasn't putting as much care maybe into people's records, and it did become a job to a certain extent. And when you're making something as personal as a lathe, I think it's really easy to make a crappy lathe cut and to pass it out the door. And at the end of the day, you know what I mean? And it's like, at the end of the day, I think most people won't say anything, or like, it's not like I've had a lot of like returns or complaints really, but it's just when I start noticing that I'm not putting the same love into it, I'm like I'm in a band, I know what it's like for someone to not care. And I think that was a really kind of a not great feeling, and I needed to put a pause on it and being like, and why when I came back, I'm doing, much more selective, not taking on as many customers, as I'm like, I really want to work on stuff that I'm as passionate to put this out and work on this and make something great as the band is, because this should be like a really collaborative, fun thing. And I'm really at that spot with it now, which feels great. Like, I'm really passionate about every release that I'm doing and everything that I'm making. And the music is all fun, and I like listening to it for 20 days straight.
I mean, that's a really beautiful self-awareness piece too. And I think that's like, maybe that's missing in a lot of the steps of production. So I love, and it's validating for me, because there's days that you're just like yesterday was a complete and total write-off. Like, I was just like, there are no good records that are going to get made today. I am not in the headspace to do anything correct. I'm not even going to turn my machine on, because havoc and hellfire will rain down. I'm not going to tempt the record gods today.
Well, that's,
you know
I feel like that's just lathes. Like, there's some days where I'll go to cut and it's not even my mood. It's like the machine just doesn't want to sound good. And, whether it's temperature or whatever it is, I just feel like there's some days I turn it on and the magic isn't there, and I'm like, okay, I just need to walk away. And then I'll come in the next morning, I'll make like a tiny tweak, and I'll be like, it's perfect. Like, I don't know what it was, but you can't tempt. The lathe gods will tell you when it's time to cut.
You can't force it. I want to know, because you have worked with one of the bands of the moment, the Linda Lindas. How did that connection come about? That record was so cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I guess good timing on my part, but
totally.
I mean, it was a no-brainer even at the point when I worked with them. I mean, I guess like to me, none of this was a shock, because even when I first saw them, like I saw them open for Bikini Kill, so it's not like it was like I saw this tiny band at this corner. It's like I saw them play at the Palladium. Like, I think they were on LA's radar before they were obviously on
everybody else's radar.
Yeah, but I saw them and they were just so great. And so it was kind of when I was having like right when the pandemic started was, I think, when my creative lathe renaissance was like, I was like, had a lot more time, and I was like I think that was really when I had like my second falling in love with lathe making. And I just reached out to them because I was just trying to set up some stuff. I was like, screw it. Like, I'm going to reach out to these bands because everybody isn't touring, and it seems like a lot of bands need a little extra money. And so I reached out to quite a few bands that I really liked, and they were one of them. And they were just like on top of it. Like their parents are kind of like their managers, and they're on their Instagram. Like they just super jumped on it. We made it happen with their EP. Yeah, it was super sweet. Like they would come by, they printed out their, like, I think like their parents are like all imperfect things for, like, their dad, I think, produced the record, and then one of their parents is like a graphic designer, and so they made the jackets and stuff. But they were super sweet and super involved, and like brought stuff by and came and like checked out the little studio. And yeah, I mean,
how many did you wind up doing?
We did 100, and they sold pretty quickly. But they didn't sell out immediately. Like, they took a second, and then they sold out over the course of a few months, and that was really exciting. And then obviously the library thing happened, and they blew up and became the biggest band. And now I receive like still like 2 emails a day, people asking about those records. First and foremost, the band and I agreed to like make 100 of them. And so I would never make more of the records without obviously being in an agreement with them. And the other part of me is kind of like, the thing I love about lathes is that they are limited in this way. And it's like, could we make more? Yes, tomorrow. Yeah. But one, it's not like you're going to make a ton of money off of it. Like, they're way better off pressing vinyl and doing all the millions of things they're doing to go be superstars. And for me, I get to be like, have my little punk release of 100 of their records. And I'm like, that's more exciting to me than making more and making a few $100. Like, I love that there's only 100 of these, because you had to know, like, you had to be in the know for it. Like, you had to, and to me, that's more exciting. And like, that's, it's kind of like the ultimate best case scenario in anything you're making, where it's like, you make something, people sleep on it, and then it becomes really desirable, and you're like, yep, and it's super limited, and I'm never gonna make more. We can make something else, but
we can change it. You can do a different label, you can make it a different color, but that's the only way we're doing it.
Yeah, but you want to reward people, it's like that's
the thing, right? Like, scarcity. Lathe cuts are scarcity, limited edition, like all of that needs to enter the conversation. I feel like that's like part of the hiccup with people going from not liking their turnaround time at a pressing plant, and then being like, oh, this person can do it, no problem. So then they're like, oh yeah, Rob, do 200. And I'm like, but that's going to take you literally 200 hours for an LP. Like, here's what your price point is.
Like, for the indie artist series that we're doing, I think that's an important point, is like, how would a band, or how should a band be assessing using, doing a lathe cut or using a pressing plant? I mean, you sort of have all sides of that. What would you tell somebody?
I mean, especially for an indie band, something I really like to do, and like I'll do for my band, for example, is I'll make like a little lathe cut before every tour, but I'll make like 20 of them. And I'm not trying to like promote scarcity in the sense that, like, I know there's also craziness where it's like, why can't I just buy this stupid record and now it's like $300 on Discogs, and like that kind of scarcity can be frustrating. But I think for like indie bands or people coming up, I think there's something really fun to reward your early supporters. And I think that's how I look at like the Linda Linda's thing. Or for indie bands, I think lathes are really cool for like, make a small run of something really cool for your fans or for people that support you early on, but you can keep making those. Like, I don't think you should limit your music so people can't have it, but I think it's really exciting to make fun, unique things so that people can kind of be like, like I liked this band first, or whatever, the obnoxious, or like, for just giving your money to people and like supporting them before they have more value, I guess,
Well, and it's just like, like doing lathe cuts that would only be available on tour, and then your press records are available online or whatever.
Yeah, because then you come out, you support the band. It's like you get the reward for that. You get something special, and I think that's, you know, being on both ends of it. It's like I think that's really exciting. And
yeah, because I mean, it is exciting because it is limited and it is special, and you know, it is bespoke. Whatever, like whatever buzzword you want to insert here. It is like there's a different relationship with hand making that record and like handing it over to the band than, you know, and doing 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 or 20. I love doing 20. I think it's my favorite.
20's great.
20's great. Yeah, 20's great. It's like a nice couple of days if it's an LP. If it's like 7 inches, it's like done in a day. I'm like, oh, that was great.
Yeah.
It's not good days.
Totally with you. Totally with you.
I am booked out until the second week of August right now.
Yeah, it's crazy. And that's, I've always been really lax, but even I've had to start doing like, it's funny how I'm sure you're experiencing this too, Robin, like even as lathe cutters, we're almost adopting the woes of the pressing plants are starting to trickle down in a way. Like even my plastic had a delay, and like, it's not PVC pellets, but it's like, it's still like slowly, like it's starting to feel the same things because people are reaching out more and lathe cutters are filling up too. And it's just, yeah, nobody can escape it.
That's one thing I think if either of you want to explain to people, I'm not sure that people understand like what material you're using and how it's not the same thing.
My records are out of PETG. So I don't know what, like your squares are, and you do mostly, I mean, you do sometimes circles, sometimes squares, but yours is polycarb, is that right?
Yeah, I use polycarbonate plastic.
Yeah.
So I'm I call a weird, so the main difference is, pressing plants use specific plastic and pellets, and I call a warehouse that is used to selling plastic to like, I think like medical facilities is also what a lot of it's used for, or like weird construction projects, or like it is not a plastic that would be used for anything musical in any other sense. And so they call me Hocus Pocus every time.
Shades of Sarah Jessica Parker, you're welcome.
They're always so confused as to what I need. And so it is not a material that would typically be musical.
Yeah, which is, I mean, it's kind of good that we're on the outside a little bit. I mean, PTG for me is used in face shields. So there was like a hot minute where I was like, oh no, but we're fine. I haven't really run out of records.
And are you ordering those in the shapes?
Yeah, do you CNC cut your own?
No. What I discovered that became my saving grace was one of my friends was like, so I guess I'll start with like, my mom and my sister are both like, you know, my sister has kids, they're really into scrapbooking, and so they have those Cricut machines. And they've always been like, oh, the Cricut machine, it's the best thing. And I'm like, okay. And one of my lathe cutting friends, he's like, hey, I got one of those Cricut cutting machines, and was telling me, he's like, that's how you can start doing these shapes. And I'm like, shut up. So then I went and bought one, and my mom and my sister were so excited because we could finally bond over it. Literally. And so everyone's like, so what are you using? Like a router, a CNC machine? I'm like, it's scrapbooking time in my garage. It is just big arts and crafts party.
I love that.
Yeah, that was a game changer, because now it's pretty easy. And I just use the extra thin pieces of plastic, and it's like, you can just pop it out.
What do you find are the worst things of lathe cutting, besides the machine being temperamental?
I think that like, I don't know if you feel this way, but like, especially when something's on a time crunch, every time I go to start a job, before I can get it dialed in, I'm like, oh my God, I can't, like, or if something doesn't sound quite right, I like always I have to get over the anxiety of like, I'm not gonna be able to make this sound good. I'm not gonna be able to make this work, or like my machine's gonna break, or like I still like, everything still feels like I'm holding my breath a little bit until I get that. Because for folks that don't know, I guess it's like, part of lathe cutting is, it's just like, at least, I don't know your process, Robin, I'm assuming it's the same, where like you just have to do a million little test cuts to like dial in these machines. And there's things you learn, but there's not really a 100% tried and true way to get every machine to sound perfect on every cut, because every song is differently, it's produced differently, there's different qualities. Like, maybe this singer, for some reason, like their S's and their P's are just really like, the lathe is hating them. And so it's just kind of like just this trial and error of making a million small tweaks. And like during that process, it's always, just like sucking in a little bit of air, being like, okay, like, I hope this will do it.
Hold that thought. It's time for an Amanda fact.
Two brothers, Will and Fred Geisberg, who had previously worked for Emil Erliner, you will know his name as the guy that gave us the flat disc, were working for a company called Gramophone Typewriter. And they set out on a series of tours for the company in 1901. On these tours, they would connect with popular opera singers and get them to record arias, often in hotel rooms. These masters would be made into discs that sold in relatively high quantities. Interestingly, the Gramophone Typewriter Company would later become the company known as HMV, or His Master's Voice, which is really well known for the iconic dog sitting next to the gramophone. Excellent marketing. The best marketing, probably, in record-making history. So iconic. And an added little bit of trivia for you. That dog was actually a real dog, and his name was Nipper. You can totally win some trivia sometime in a bar with that. HMV would later evolve into a company you might actually recognize today called EMI, which is now owned by UMG.
Have you received your teal box in the mail? No, not jewelry, your high-fidelity Eargasm earplugs. Eargasm high-fidelity earplugs keep your hearing protected in style, but they also recognize that their products aren't only for hearing protection and are widely used for people's mental health and well-being in noisy situations. How do these help you in your daily life? From noise sensitivity, overstimulation, or ear protection, they're the brand for you. Eargasm has a great deal with 10% off your order using, you guessed it, discount code Women in Vinyl at checkout. www.eargasm.com. And now, back to the episode.
I have a question, like a technical question about how you emboss, because I use a diamond, and you don't use a diamond. You use like a steel or a titanium like needle.
I
right?
used to use tungsten, which was what I started off. And they recently, I still buy, like Mike is kind of like my lathe dealer, but they've upgraded. So they use kind of like a sapphire tip, which has improved the sound drastically from the metal.
Totally.
Like it's, even in the time that I've been cutting, I think I've been cutting for like 7 or 8 years now. And it's like, without me necessarily even getting any better, like just, it's cool that more people are getting into it, because the technology for these like archaic machines is getting better and better, so that you can make stuff that sounds closer to the real deal. But and it's like, I think if anyone's interested, because we keep talking about sound quality too, like for anyone interested in it, it's like, there's tons of sound clips up of different types of cuttings and materials too. So it's like, it's cool because you can get something that fits your budget, or like figure out what you need.
The lathe community definitely has like a a la carte pricing. You can, like, who was it? I can't remember who sang the song, but like, you can have whatever you like. Like, you can have custom, like you can have color labels, you can have color jackets, you can have no jackets, you can have no labels, you can kind of DIY stuff if you want, which is like super punk rock. You can screen print the back of the record, which I don't know if you've done, but I'm like super interested in screen printing because I feel like it looks cool.
I haven't really
a lot of work, but
attempted it on my own as much, but it's something that for other I'm always cooking up. I've got like 10 things that are half baked in my head at all times.
With all this being said, is there a good resource or is there a piece of advice that you would give to an indie artist or band that's looking for a lathe cutter or to do lathe cuts?
Um, I was writing this out actually for the written one. I think if anyone's interested in getting lathe cuts done, you kind of can't go wrong hitting up anybody because for the most part, everybody kind of knows. And I think that they can lead you to somebody looking for what you're trying to get. Just because it is like, oh, some people will do a lot of rounds. Some people seem really good at screen printing. Like some people are trying to do more label releases and it's just there's a wide variety. I believe lathecuts.com that Mike runs still has a few people that are operating out of the co-op that I used to work at. And so there's a few resources on there.
Yeah, like Precarian guys are there too, right?
Yeah, Precarian, Zach over at Precarian. I know he's doing a ton of stuff still. But for anyone looking to get into lathe cutting and doing it themselves, you can still go to lathecuts.com. I actually used to help. I did it a few times. Mike runs a lathe cuts camp, which is great because you can pay to go out there, and for like a weekend, you'll learn how to use the machines, which I think is super important. I worked on these machines for years before I ended up actually buying one and being like, okay, I want one so I can have it forever. Otherwise, I think I would have been crying at it too. But it's not for everyone. And I love it. And it's something I can't imagine my life without because it's kind of my art form. But at the same time, it's something that definitely sounds sexier than it maybe is in practice. You have to really, it takes a specific kind of person. And I think it's probably the same with like working at a pressing plant too. Like at the end of the day, what you are doing is not like a very sexy or even honestly at times all of that artistic of a process. It's laborious and it's manual labor, and there's a lot that goes into it that I think if you're just interested in making it for your band or something casually, there are other cheaper or maybe more like hobby things you can do to kind of make records. Like I know they make some cheaper like toy sort of machines, but yeah, I think attending that camp if you're seriously thinking about making the plunge is a really great idea, just because you get to work with them and see if it's something you really like, which it actually might not be at times. Right. For me, I hate it. And even though I'm saying I'm busy and stuff, like people are absolutely welcome to reach out to me because sometimes I can take on jobs, but if not, I know so many lathe cutters and I'm more than happy to recommend people to other people, because at the end of the day, it's like, it's not like vinyl's going to be doing well if there's one lathe cutter left or one pressing plant left. Right. It's kind of like we all need to work together, or anybody getting business is helpful for everyone, because we need ultimately, or want, the record community and the love for vinyl to survive. And that means that more businesses pop up, more people can help and do things, and at the end of the day, that's it's propelling everybody forward.
At the last in-person Making Vinyl anyway, I think the thing that was really interesting was that everybody was sort of talking about how we're all the next generation of this industry. And I think it's really cool to see how inclusive and collaborative everybody is. And I think that that is what is really going to bring the industry forward and keep vinyl growing.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to ask our weird oddball question that we ask people. We don't give you any preparation for unless you've listened to the podcast. Because then sometimes you'll sneak it in there and you'll be like, what? But
I'm ready.
All right. It's like the desert island question, but like times 1,000. So
no.
If you, especially because you're a lathe cutter, so you could actually do this, which is like the best part of it. If you could make yourself any 7-inch record with any song on the A side and any song on the B side from any time of all time, what would that 7-inch be? I know, the hardest question in the entire world.
All right, you're gonna have to edit out like 15 minutes of silence.
I feel like we need to have like Jeopardy music or something.
Yeah.
So that there's like, there's a 3-minute time limit on it. Starting now.
Well, I'm okay. So I'm thinking like, okay, A side, B side. It's the only thing I can listen to. I'm like, I have to have the duality of like my two favorite types of music, which means like I gotta have like something kind of like a sappy, 50s thing, and then I gotta have like a really good disco track. Like that's my two.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
I feel like I would probably have, I don't know why the B side first, I'm gonna say would maybe be like Angel Baby or something. Like I just fucking love that song, and it reminds me of my partner, and it's sweet, and I think that would be like the cry B side. And I think the A side would have to be what's my A side disco track? I think it would have to be this Italo disco song that I love called Dolce Vita.
We haven't even talked about your bitchin' record collection. You have one of the most eclectic record collections that I've ever seen advertised on the internet.
Well, thank you.
You are constantly, I'm like, what are you listening? What is this? It makes me go to YouTube so often, so I can be like, what?
It's because I just, I think I really like disco, and I've always kind of been into collecting.
That's awesome. It's so awesome.
Which is funny. It's like I play in a punk band, and then like the other half of my collection is a lot of like oldies or like country stuff, and then it's like the other 50% is just a lot of eclectic disco and dance stuff.
From all over the world, might I add, though.
Yeah, and I think it's like I've always been into collecting that stuff, and then really like I feel like I really went hardcore on it, especially in the pandemic, because that's when I started just bulk ordering. I'm like, I can't go to any record stores. I gotta pay shipping from anywhere. I might as well order stuff from Japan or from like from Beirut or something. Like I'm like, But it's been really fun. It's kind of been like my, not to be cheesy, but I'm like, it's like my travel. Like I just get like, find stuff from all around.
That's awesome.
Did you start DJing with your record collection a long time ago, or is that a recent development?
No, that's actually something I started doing with my partner, because I couldn't practice with my band, and she's kind of like a drummer, and so I bought a drum set. I was like,
I bet she loves that. You're kind of like a drummer.
Well, she hasn't played in years. She's not, she's an artist, but not a musician by trade, and so I was like trying to force it, and I was like, I need somebody to do music with me. And then she's also into records. And so we just kind of ended up DJing at a local bar that we went to. We were watching the DJs. We're like, we should do this.
Yeah.
Why don't we DJ here? And then I just emailed them. I was like, yes, I am Hocus Bogus Records. We're interested. But it's been fun. And so, I started doing that, or I was doing for a while, like a local radio show, just out of my garage and stuff. And it's, I've had a lot more time, I think, maybe kind of like you're saying, like in being home a lot more. I've always listened to my records and love my record collection, but I think just really being at home, I like kind of have a different, even more of a deeper relationship with it, because I can listen to them all day, or I don't know, I feel even more in tune, or like more into vinyl, I think, than I ever have.
I think that is incredible. I think that's a beautiful way to end our conversation.
This was fun. Thank you so much, Bailey.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
Bailey Moses. Myth, legend. All right. Well, we'll let you get going in the California sun, and we'll stay out here in the East Coast gloomy, doomy.
Yeah, it's freezing. It's like 70 or something.
Please You're so LA.
I'm sorry. Well, thank you guys so much. It's been great talking with you.
Thanks so much for your time. You can check out more about Bailey at Hocus Bogus That's not Hocus Pocus.
Hocus Bogus with a B.
With a B and a G. Yeah. and I am 8-Bit. We will tell you more about their companies and everything in the show notes. Until next time, dear listeners.
Thanks for joining us on the Women in Vinyl podcast. You can join our ever-growing list of sponsors. Other record labels: Selector, Couple Design, Eargasm, Groove Washer, Glowtronics, New Gen Audio, and Vinyl Revolution Record Show. And thanks for sponsoring the show. Hey, as always, you can join our conversation on Instagram or send us a note at media@womeninvinyl.com. Clock us. Send us info. If you have a question, we got the answer, or we'll find it. We won't lie to you. And check out womeninvinyl.com for past episodes, the store, the job board, and the library of resources. Don't forget to like and subscribe and give us a review on your favorite podcast delivery method. You can also contribute to furthering our mission at patreon.com/womeninvinyl. Hey, guess what? This episode, 45 minutes. You know there was more. You want more? You get more. Go to patreon.com and you can get more. And you'll find all the B-sides, the deep cuts, and the amazing extras, including longer episodes, and contribute to the creation of scholarships and educational opportunities to further the demystification, the infiltration of more women and non-binary identifying humans into the vinyl making space, decreasing those turnaround times every week. Yeah, we love your records. We want you to love them too. womeninvinyl.com.
This episode has been brought to you by Women in Vinyl and Red Spade Records. Thank you for listening. Please remember to subscribe, and you can always contact us directly by visiting www.womeninvinyl.com.